All right, mighty fine good day. Let's see, we've got nobody coming in as of yet. As people are coming into the room, I'm watching the attendee list for everybody. So as you're getting logged in, thank you for taking some time to join us today. We'll get started here in just a minute once everybody gets moved in out of the waiting room into the actual event. So just a couple things to get started with. Please make sure, use your chat window. So the chat window is there to provide feedback from everybody, questions for myself and Sam that we can be able to answer and provide feedback for. So please put it in the chat box. I'm going to be monitoring that during the event. And we'll be getting started here in just a couple minutes. I see we got several people still coming in from the waiting room right now. All right, I think that's everybody in the waiting room right now. Chances are we'll still have a few more that's going to be coming in the next few minutes. So we'll go ahead and get started. Mighty fine good day, everyone. My name is Cale Harbor. I'm the product manager here at Advanced Control Solutions. We are an excellent partner with Robotiq. And with me today, I have the honor of having Mr. Samuel Bouchard, who is the CEO of Robotiq, with us today. Sam has put together an awesome team, wonderful products to be able to support the collaborative robot marketplace. So the topic today, we're going to be talking about automation during these challenging times and why you would even want to consider investing in automation during a pandemic crisis like what we're going through. And I think there's definitely some great opportunities for that. And we're going to have Sam sharing his thoughts and ideas into it. He's been doing this for a long time. Sam, do you want to tell a little bit how you got started with Robotiq?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Kel. So we founded the company in 2008, which interestingly enough was the last financial crisis that we had. So we started really with grippers, and we added several tools for collaborative robots in the meantime. And the goal was really to simplify how people can deploy robots. So we still see a lot of need for robots and cobots out there. But we see that we need to simplify these, and that's the goal of the company.
Yeah, and it's actually amazing because you and I've been several events together. We've had multiple meetings, and I don't think it would be a stretch of the imagination for me to say that you have a personal passion for helping people with automation beyond just what Robotiq provides as hardware. In fact, Sam is the author of the book Lean Robotics. So this is a wonderful resource guide to help somebody get started in automation and what those guiding principles are. And these are principles that apply whether you actually use a Robotiq product or not. But what was the actual inspiration behind pursuing that path, Sam?
Yeah, so definitely we have a passion. That's why we founded the company as well. We've personally done a lot of manual work, and every time I would go into a repetitive task, my mind would always go and try to think on how can I do it better? How can I do it faster? How can I automate it? So I think it was just part of myself, and that's still what we want to do. We really believe that humans have huge potential. They have great dexterity, great judgment, great creativity. And that's really that passion for automating the repetitive tasks so these people can move on and do something that brings more value and that's also more interesting for them. That's really the passion. And with respect to the book, what we can solve a lot of things with technology, but we need to bridge the gap because the technology will not do everything, and it won't snap like this. We're pushing all the time to make the technology do more and more and more. Between what the technology do and its implementation in your factory, there's knowledge in between. And we believe that by contributing to that knowledge, we can bridge the gap between technology and its use in your factory. So that's really why I wrote the book, because I saw so many questions come in over and over again on the one side, and on the other side, industrial robotics and cobots even more. It is something that is quite new. And there was nothing standard, nothing really defined on how to systematize that deployment. So I just took all the experience from the whole team and I tried to encapsulate it in that book. And we're really using this as a blueprint as we're helping our customers and with our partners. They use several of these principles. So even though every project is different, how can we at least follow the same process and save time and be more efficient as we do it?
Very good. Thank you for sharing that, Sam. So at this point, I think we've got everybody here on the initial. I'm going to let you take it away and begin the main part of the presentation now, Sam.
All right. Thank you, Cal.
And again, just as a reminder to everyone, I will be monitoring the chat room. If you have a question for Sam, we will be breaking for those. So please post it to the chat room, and I'll be feeding those to Sam to make sure we get all of those answered.
Absolutely. So I got an official program, but I would be very happy to engage and answer any of these questions. So just to complete the introduction, so we're a manufacturer of plug-and-play components for cobots. ACS is one of our expert partners in the US, one of the great partners with a lot of expertise. And our end users are manufacturers. So we sell our products everywhere around the world. And our mission, our company mission is really to free human hands so people can do more, so companies can be more productive. And so far we've freed more than 10,000 hands, meaning that we've sold more than 10,000 units, and we touch more than 10,000 projects. So what I'm sharing with you is really some of the best practices, some of the good ideas that we've seen, and maybe some of the pitfalls too that we've seen that we should avoid. So you see here a few examples of the kind of products that we make. Some grippers, cameras, force sensors, always with easy-to-use interface for collaborative robot. And what we want to do is we want to do the manual task on the factory floor with these products, but we want to do it in an efficient way so you can start production faster. So one of the challenge in deploying cobots is really going from the cobot, so the arm and the controller, to the full application. And that's really the challenge, and that's really where we want to contribute and where we want to help you, and so does ACS, how to go from the robot to really the robot application. And that's the idea behind Lean Robotics. So Lean Robotics, it's really a guide to making robot works in your factory. And the goal, again, is to help you start production faster, just like it is the goal for our products. So what's included in this book, and we'll touch on a few of them today. First, there's the step-by-step guide. So really, what is the process from A, I got an idea, I want to deploy, to Z, I got a working, productive robot. Some project management tool, and some good tips, good principles on how to get started and how to scale. So I will not go through the whole process. It would be a little dry for a webinar, but that's really the whole idea. So how do we go from the design, the integrate, up to the operate mode? And how do we do this as efficiently as possible? So if you're interested in getting into the details of the process, I invite you to look at the book. We have also some material and some training available, but I just wanted to give you the overview to begin with. Obviously, robots, they're great, they're fascinating, they move just like humans, but in the end, they're not a goal in itself. They're just a tool, not a tool that you can use in your factory. And this tool has to serve your company objectives, your company strategy. So maybe just to get you involved and to get a better understanding of what is your interest into deploying robots, I would do the first poll, Kel, looking at what are the motivation, why you're looking to deploy robots, or why you're already deploying robots in your factories.
Okay, we've got the poll up now.
All right. So the
definitely one of the
mm-hmm.
being able to find labor and reduce costs definitely is already showing up. Responses are coming in.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. It's pretty nice to see them moving live. Do everybody see the poll, Kel, at the same time as we're seeing it?
Do
you know?
I actually this is a newer piece of webinar software. I know we're seeing all the results from everything. I'm not sure if everyone else is. If someone could give me a quick feedback in the chat window, maybe Max, I saw you online. Just let me know, do you see all the responses or just yours?
So
all right, I think most of the responses are in now.
Okay, yeah. So the answer that comes the most at 41% is the need to increase consistency and quality. Second place, challenge finding manual labor at 23%. So 1 out of 4 is finding manual labor, and 17% the need to reduce cost. And so that's pretty interesting. It's still moving a bit, but these are the main 3 reasons why. So quality, consistency, challenge finding manual labor, and need to reduce costs. Also a little bit of solving ergonomic issues.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
hey, Sam, I did get feedback. They're only seeing the initial questions, so they're not seeing the numbers. So just the challenge in finding labor was about a quarter of you, 27%. The need to reduce costs is about 16%. The overwhelming response was 38%, needing to increase consistency and quality of what's being produced.
Yep, interesting.
And then at 11% is solving ergonomic issues. So I think we've stabilized now.
Great. So let's keep these answers and your answer in mind. And maybe the next question that I'd like to ask to you, and we don't have a poll for this, but you can either answer in the chat, is what's going to happen. So obviously right now we're really head down. We're trying to solve some very short-term issues in many of our companies. But we're in that lunch and learn. So let's try to look ahead and look beyond the COVID era. What's going to be the lasting impact? What's going to change in your company and in your industry? So do you see that things will get back to normal? Do you think that the demand is going to increase for your products or decrease for your products? And the reason you gave me in the poll, how will they evolve? So for those of you who said that we want to increase the consistency and quality, will that still be a challenge post-COVID? Same thing for the manual labor challenge. Will this still be a challenge post-COVID? And I think that answer is interesting because obviously we don't know the timing. We don't know exactly when things are going to go back to normal. But it's important to, even if we don't know exactly when it's going to happen, to think about what's going to be the lasting impact and what is the impact also on automation. So if we had good reasons to look at automations before COVID, will these reasons be even more important or less important after COVID? And obviously, if they are as much important or even more, then it's more argument to look at automation, even if we're in that challenging time where maybe you're working remotely, for instance, and not running at full capacity. The discussion I've been having with manufacturers is most of them still see the reasons to automate that they had before the pandemic. They still see them being there after the pandemic. So again, the challenge of finding manual labor, that was one of the big driver 6 months ago and before. Most of them still expect that it's going to be there. And many of them are seeing new reasons to automate. So many of them were challenged with supply chain issues. So they're really thinking about, okay, how can we use automation to increase, to improve the business continuity, reduce some of the risk associated to our supply chain, maybe manufacture more locally, but at a decent cost. Also, we have some big end users who have very big initiatives to bring robots now because they see that the physical distancing is going to be a thing for the next year or so from their estimate. So that's also, these are all new reasons that why people are looking to automate in these days. So my prediction is that obviously there's going to be the robotics industry right now, it's slowed down because many of the customers, the demand for their own goods, so many manufacturers, the demand for their good is going down. So many companies froze their capex, for instance, for this year. But if we look at what happened in 2008 and 9, the robotics industry dropped, and then it really bounced back very strongly. And our assumption is that it's going to do the same thing this time, but it's going to be potentially even stronger because of all the new reasons to automate. And one thing that we gotta keep in mind if you're automating is you're changing the type of labor. So you're going from manual labor to the robot doing the job. But what you're going to need to have is people that have the robotic skills to take care of these robots, to design the projects, to maintain the projects, and to do the programming, etc. So that shift in skills in your factory, so going from manual skills to more knowledge skill, people able to use the robot, we really expect that this is going to be a very key ingredient if you want to deploy automation, if you want to deploy robotics. You really have to keep this in mind. And obviously, if you don't have that know-how right now, there are many ways you can acquire it. You can outsource it, you can hire people, or you can groom your people. But this won't happen by magic. If it's important for you, you have to keep it in mind and have a plan for this. So our business and ACS's business didn't go to zero during COVID. We still have a very good level of business, not as strong as it was in February and March. But what we're seeing is that there are a lot of people deploying robots these days. And maybe I would just like to get a few examples, Kale, of maybe some of the companies locally that are deploying robots.
Yeah, we've had a variety of companies, variety of different industries that have been taking advantage. Some of the obvious ones, there's a new manufacturer of PPE equipment in Alabama that we're working with that recently purchased 9 collaborative robots to help in the manufacture of different protective equipment that they're manufacturing. But we've also seen areas such as, and we took advantage of actually Robotiq's finishing Copilot to be able to go into an application where we're grinding weld seams down on an aluminum plate. It was an application where during the remote work where people were needing to be at home and rotate through, they needed to be able to get this task done. They didn't have anyone to be able to come on site and reliably day after day fulfill those orders. But the other thing they wanted to make sure of as they brought people in, they were getting inconsistencies. So as they rotated through during the pandemic, one person doing the job one day and one another, they would get different qualities of the grind. So in that case, we used a UR10 with Robotiq's finishing Copilot to be able to reliably and consistently, part after part after part, provide the same quality to do those weld seam grindings. So it's really been dramatic, just a huge variety of industries that have popped up needing these type solutions during this time period.
Yeah, and we're seeing similar things. So we saw some companies whose the demand for their goods really increased. So they were part of the COVID economy. So as you mentioned, protective equipment. We had some medical testing machines, some sensors that went in ventilators, some machine parts, plastic parts that went into these machines. Yep. So we've seen some of these customers really accelerate their projects. And what we've seen is that the ones who already had started their robotics deployment, who already had some key partners, they were really the ones that were really first out of the gate. They could really speed this up. And there were some others who said, I wish I looked at robots before for these reasons, because in those times it was too challenging. They didn't have that relationship. So I think that's something that people realize is that. And again, we're seeing this in other parts of the industry too. The companies that are really growing within the pandemic are the ones that were really well suited for these times, and they just accelerate. And the ones that were starting from zero, it was a little bit more difficult. So that doesn't mean that it's impossible. We have some customers, first-time customers, that started to deploy robots into the pandemic. One thing that's very consistent is to rely on trusted partner in those days. So we know there's a good level of stress. We know there's some tight deadlines in those days. So having a local partner like ACS, I think, makes all the sense in the world in those days. So you can rely on them, rely on their experience, because everything is a little bit more complicated. That being said, we and again, ACS is really well equipped with this, all the remote training, all the remote demos, the remote support capability, and the local presence if needed as things reopen in your area.
Thank you, Sam. Hey, Sam, I've got an unscripted question for you that you're not prepared for.
Go ahead.
Robotiq has done a very remarkable job in your online resources. There's the
Mhm.
online training academies for CNC machine tending, for pick and place routines, for dispensing routines, for path guidance, for surface finishing that you have available, and you've got all the online training resources. And then, of course, you've got the developers community, DOF,
Yep.
for collaborative robot manufacturers to be able to share best practices and ideas and problem solvings. How has the activity level of those resources been over the last several months of people taking advantage of those?
Yes, absolutely. So again, we were lucky in a sense that we had all of these initiatives in place before COVID. So the e-learning, the remote demos, the DAF community, and we're really seeing an uptick, especially in the e-learning. People really leveraged this because it was the best way to get the learning, because maybe some people were away from the production floor for some time. So they really leveraged this. They said, okay, let's take this opportunity to upskill myself or upskill the people in my team. And we've really seen the use of these platforms increase in the past few months.
Yeah. Have you, in your experience using these resources, seen people be able to successfully deploy their first collaborative robot solution with just being able to take advantage of these online training and resource opportunities that you offer?
Yeah. So between that combination of self-serve learning tools, so the e-learning, the community, and the local phone support of the local partner, we've seen some customers buying their first cobots. I have one example in mind in the Northeast. It's a company, they're a contract manufacturer for a medical device, and they had a huge surge in demand, and they deployed their first 4 cobots in those times, leveraging the online tools plus remote assistance from their local partner.
Awesome.
So it can be done.
Awesome. Great.
So there's a good level of uncertainty. If robotics matters, if automation matters for your business objectives and for your strategy, obviously it's easy to just look at all the information and be paralyzed or just keep busy on things that are not necessarily important. I think it's a great opportunity now to really focus yourself, focus the team, and try to find things that are at the intersection of the things that really matter for the business and things you can really take control on. And that's what I'd like to discuss a little bit, depending on your context. So maybe, Kale, if we want to open the next hole, I would be curious to know what happened to the demand for the goods that you are manufacturing in your factories these days. As the demand increased, did it stay the same throughout the pandemic, or did it decrease? So the poll is open. So I'm looking at the answer. I don't know, Kale, if you see the number of people who answered to the poll. So far the results that are in, it's half of the respondents, the demand for the goods that they make decreased. 36% is the same, and about 10% increased. So we're in that range at this point. And so we see more that kept the same level or decreased than those who have increased. And Gail, if you can open the last poll about the budget.
It is online now.
So with this second question, we'll try to see where we are on these 4 quadrants. So do you have time available depending on the demand on your products, and do you have budget available? So the poll that is active right now is what happened to your CapEx budget since COVID. So did you have to freeze the budget? Did it stay the same, or did it increase to cope with the new reality? So let's take a few seconds. to get the answers in.
Yeah, the numbers right now seem to be settling out. We're over 60% people had a frozen budget during this time. About 33% saying it stayed the same. And then 8% actually said that their budget increased during this time.
Yeah, very good. So very consistent with the previous question, where potentially the ones that the demand decreased. It's probably well correlated with what happened to the capex budget, which would make a lot of sense. So the next section of the discussion is really about what to do. So let's say we start with the assumption that automation can be part, and robotics can be part of your business strategy. It makes business sense. Now let's focus on the other side. So the things that you can control depending on your situation. So there are some companies that are in Quadrant A. So Quadrant A is you have time, you have capacity internally, and you have budget available. So what we saw in the poll is that we had people whose capex didn't change and whose capex increased. So it was about 40% combined. So you're in that right part of the quadrant where you have budget available. And if you have time available, well, it depends on the resources and how you're set up internally. But obviously, if you have time and budget and you evaluate that robotics is an important piece of your strategy, now is a good time to start planning and deploying. So in the following part of this presentation and in Lean Robotics, I explained some concepts on how to start with the right application. So what we want to do, if you're starting your cobot deployment journey, is really take the time to look at different potential applications on your factory and really try to map them with respect to effort versus reward. And what we really advise is identify an application that is very simple. So we have guidelines in this presentation. I don't know if we're going to have the time to cover them, but if not, Kale could share the presentation to you so you can look at it and engage with their technical people afterwards to do the evaluation. But what we really advise is really to start simple. So even if you have a very high ROI project, if it's more complex, I would really advise to start simple because you're going to learn along the way. When we see customers deploying their first cobots, very rarely it's going to be their last project. So it's better to have a safer bet, win that bet, create some momentum within the company, create some know-how, and then move on to the next, maybe more challenging application. And this advice, we give it all the time, and we've given it even more strongly during COVID because, again, everything is a little bit more complicated these days. So it's even more important to start simple and to keep it simple. So if you have time available, I strongly encourage that you get involved in these projects. As I said earlier, I see a big demand for robotics after COVID, and it's going to translate into a big demand for robotic skills after COVID. And there's going to be a battle for this talent. And if you can groom it from the inside, if you identify some people, it is very an ideal scenario because you can develop your people, make them, put them in a better situation professionally within the business, leverage their expertise in the process and the business that you have. And the type of knowledge around robotics is really, it is well suited to learning by doing. So it's a little bit like playing sports. You can get lessons on how to throw a basketball, but until you throw it again and again and again, that's really when you're really assimilating that learning. And robotics and cobots, especially because it's so hands-on, you really assimilate a lot by doing. So if you have time and budget, now is a great time. And get involved to start simple and make sure that you get involved also to develop not only a project, but also develop your know-how internally. So this quadrant where you have budget available, but no time available, usually what we've seen in the past few months is the people who answer to us, I have increased demand, I have increased budget, but in many cases, because the demand is increasing, the people in the factory are also very busy adapting to the new reality, ramping up capacity, etc. So in this case, my advice is really to leverage trusted relationships you already have with partners. ACS would be one, or other robotic system integrators that you might have a good relationship with. It is the same. I still give the same advice on evaluating the application, starting simples, and staying involved. So even if you're not, if you delegate these projects to an external resource, I really, again, strongly encourage you to stay involved, to build the know-how, but also to make sure that you transfer an important piece of information to your external party, which is the understanding of your manufacturing process, which is always something critical to any robotics project. And the understanding of your process and of your company, there's no one like you who holds this know-how. So I really encourage you, again, even if you're very busy, to stay involved with the company you delegate these projects to. If you have no budget available and no time available, obviously it is tough to move some projects along. But still, times like these, and maybe sometimes to do remote work, sometimes potentially away from the factory floor, it is a great time to invest in yourself. So invest in your own know-how. And even if you don't have any budget or time available as company resources, if you see that for the future of your company or the future of your career, robotics can be an important piece of it, I encourage you to try to carve out some time to learn. So there's the link there to the leanrobotics.org website. You can download the book free. You can buy it on Amazon or get the audiobook. Kale was mentioning the e-learning. So we have also some Lean Robotics lessons specifically on some applications. We have CNC machine tending. We have finishing, and we're going to add palletizing very shortly. So these resources are there, are free, and they can be great ways to improve your skill set and help you gain momentum as you start getting more budget or more time in the near future. And the last quadrant is, I believe, a quadrant where many of you might be considering the answer that CapEx budget is frozen, and the capacity maybe is freed up a little bit because the demand for your goods is decreasing. So if you see that robotics is important for the future, and if you're in that situation where you have a little bit more time yourself or in your team, but you don't have any budget yet, now is a great time to really plan your project. So really front load your robotics effort. The first step to evaluate the applications still hold. And now what we'd like to do maybe is go a little further into the different applications. So maybe not directly jump into a project, but have a good inventory of what are the potential projects, mapping the manual processes, and maybe even defining some cell concepts with suppliers, with ACS, and maybe with the help of our integration coaches. So go all the way to that step of defining the cell concept. So I'm not talking about doing a complete design. Because cobots are simple, because they're easy to use, because they can leverage plug-and-play components to build these, we can do the 80-20 pretty quickly. So we can do 80% of the concept work with 20% of the effort. We can do it at no cost or very little cost to really give you an idea. And when, again, budget become available, then you would have a great roadmap. Okay, here's all of our applications that we can do. Here are the benefits. Here are the different concepts. Here are the budgetary estimates. So when budgets become available, very quickly you're going to be able to ramp up your cobot deployment initiative and reap the benefits as the capacity needs to increase in your factories. So these are my advice, depending on where you stand. These are 4 different realities, but I mean, I give advice, but I also had a lot of challenges recently as a business leader, and so did the rest of the team in terms of, okay, there's a crisis now. Obviously, there are some urgent things we need to do, but how can we make sure that we still invest for the future and we don't fall in the trap of just being busy playing firefighter and always talk about the crisis? I think there's a huge need from your people and from our people to look beyond the crisis and look at the company vision and look at what the world's going to look like when we get back a little bit to normal. So these initiatives can be great ways to do this. So Kale, this was the first part. We're already a long way in our lunchtime, so maybe I would try to open it to questions at this point.
We've got a few that's come in so far, Sam. So several people in the chat window did post that they do see a need for more automation and a greater ability to be able to do remote work. So obviously we have the capability within the resources and solution that Robotiq's developed, and combining that with universal robots to automate more of these cells. One thing that we have not talked about today, and it really wasn't on the agenda, but Robotiq does offer a product called Insights to allow you to do remote monitoring of your UR cell as well for uptime, production, efficiency numbers. Are you running wasted time? In other words, is the robot sitting there waiting and not moving so that you know which applications aren't being utilized to their fullest? So that was one thing I wanted to mention to the audience, is that is something that we can get you more information on, but it's also a great product from Robotiq to let you see what's really going on in your manufacturing environment remotely. One of the other things that you did mention, the automation coaches. We had a couple of folks ask questions. Of course, ACS, we've got automation lab here. I'm standing in the middle of our automation lab now, and we can bring parts in, we can do tests, and we've got, Sam, sometimes I wonder if I work at Robotiq versus ACS because we have so much of your product in here, but gladly set this up. But one of the things we can also do is, of course, call in the automation coaches at Robotiq. And one thing we've also done, if it's an unusual part, an unusual example, or we need a resources that we don't have, Sam's put together a wonderful team. We're able to send the parts to him. They set it up, video document it, video it running, do the remote webinar and the remote prove out feasibility studies that we can tie you in for. So that's another resource to take advantage of to be able to get up and running while still working remotely or working distantly in order to keep things moving forward.
Yep.
And then one thing that I thought of right now, part of today's topic was, is this a good time to automate? Is this a good time during this event? Well, there's one more thing that's going on, at least for the US, that I did want to throw out there, and this has existed the last couple of years, but it's still a real thing, is currently under the current tax laws, Section 179, someone wants to look it up, for US people, any automation, any capital investment is 100% tax deductible the first year. You do not have to depreciate over multiple years. And we still have plenty of time to be able to get Robot Solutions, Robotiq product in before the end of the year to be able to get that deployed so that you could take advantage of that tax credit. So as we're closing up into the year, that's just one more thing that helps lower the cost of the investment, shorten the ROI a little bit further by being able to take advantage of that. So I thought I would throw that out as well. I don't see any other questions coming in right now, Sam. I think we're caught up with everything.
All right, so don't hesitate if any questions come up to interrupt. In this case, I will go back to the Lean Robotics principles. So the first one that I gave earlier is really to start simple. So when you map your different applications and you try to map them in terms of what's high impact, what's low impact, what's simple or complex, depending on your expertise, I really advise to start, obviously, if you have simple and high impact, that's the sweet spot. If you have to choose between simple, low impact and complex, high impact, I encourage you to go with a simple, low impact for the reasons that I gave earlier. Get the project, get it out of the door, get it working, start getting ROI out of it and learn, and then you can move to the next one. If you start with a high impact and complex, then you have the more risk at your first project to really create a bad first impression of Cobots because you can blow potentially the budget or the schedule. And then it is unfortunate because Cobot get a bad reputation in the factory and you lose the opportunity to leverage that tool in the future. That's why I really encourage you to start with the simple application. So what you want to do is this, start with less complex application. If you do it, it's going to be lower costs. It's going to have high ROI. you're going to deploy more robots and get more skills, because obviously the level of complexity will depend on the skills that you have. And by getting that circle going, your skills will increase and you're going to be able to tackle more complex projects. So the next question is, what's easy, what's hard? So that's a picture of my son here from last winter. One thing that's that I use to explain what's easy, what's hard. One thing that's a little counterintuitive with robotics is that some things that are really easy for humans are not necessarily easy for robots, and vice versa. So for instance, I would have a very hard time playing chess with 5 different opponents over the phone. It's very easy for a computer to do this. On the other hand, it's very easy for me to look at my pocket, grab my keys, and drop them on the table. And this would be very difficult for a robot. So that's kind of counterintuitive. And this is the test that you can do. Kind of the first step, if you're new to robotics, is when you look at a manual task, could you do it one-handed? Could you do it wearing a mitten? And could you do it with your eyes shut? If you answer yes to these 3 things, that's probably a good test that it is on the easy side of things. But obviously, to get the real answer, the best is to reach out. If it's your first project, is to reach out to folks at ACS or at Robotiq to look at the manual process with videos, and we can try to evaluate with you the feasibility of it. So what's easy, what's hard will depend on the task itself. So robots are really good to move always to the same starting point and end point, following the same trajectory. So picking and placing, following a path without applying forces. Anything where you need to apply forces, it's a little bit more complex. So not that it's impossible, but if you have to choose between something that's just motion repeating or applying forces or adapting the motion all the time, it's much easier to repeat all the time. The part that you're handling, if you're handling part, will play a role in the complexity. If you have limited number of different parts, known parts, regular shapes, it's easier than having a huge variety of irregular, deformable, or fragile parts, for instance. Something that people don't realize at the beginning is not about picking the part, but really reaching to the part. So is the part presented in a structured way, or is it presented in a bin or in a fast-moving conveyor? Again, everything that's more structured is easier for the robot. So if it's placed in a tray or always in the same way, it is easier. Again, not that it's impossible to do the other one, but if you have the choice on your first project, I would encourage you to go on the left side. On the programming side, everything that's repetitive is easier to program. If you have a lot of programming, a lot of different conditions, a lot of sensors involved, it is more complex. For those of you who had the chance, like I did, to mentor some of the first robotics team, that's something you realize when you watch kids programming their Lego robots. As long as it's about controlling the motors to do a certain number of turns, things are very easy. But you really see that the level of complexity increase when they start to have more complex programming. So some common jobs, pick and place, simple assembly, putting parts into machines, some finishing. So these are our jobs that Cobots do all the time, and that can be done with the UR and with the Robotiq products that ACS is providing. If you want more concrete examples, we have a huge section with several case studies where you hear the manufacturing engineers and their managers and the operators talk about their approach to their projects and the benefits that they got. I have 3 examples here, but there are many more if you follow this link. So the first tip was to start simple. The second tip is very consistent. It's to keep it simple. So to illustrate this principle, I put this picture here of a couple renovating. And you've probably fallen into this trap, or I've fallen into this trap personally, is starting a project and then adding to this project as we go. Oh, we might as well do this. Oh, we might as well do this. So what people call in product development feature creep. So you start a project, but you don't close it. You just add to the scope all the time. And don't do that with your first automation project. Really make sure that you have a clear understanding of your definition of done and focus on delivering this and have the robot to start to work before adding features. And it might be tempting, but keep in mind that one of the beautiful thing about cobots and cobot applications is that they're easy to use and they're easy to adapt. So it's better to deliver something that provides value and then iterate and improve it as time goes. And we have many customers who did it successfully. They deliver the first application, it works, but maybe not at full capacity, maybe at 60% of the capacity, but still it starts bringing value. And then with a few continuous improvement projects, they bring it to 100% of the needed capacity. So start simple, but also keep it simple. Another tip that we give all the time, especially when we visit factories, is people get really excited with the technology. And people have the tendency to jump in the solution before clearly defining the problem. So I don't think this is unique to robotics. I think this is a tendency that we all have to be creative and jump at the solution. But it's really worth noting that it's very important to understand the manual process before looking at the cell design. So very often, I would go on a factory and people will say, hey, Sam, look at this application. I thought of putting that robot with that tool and program it this way. And very often I ask them to do a step back and say, okay, why do you want to automate this task? And describe to me what's happening there. So what is the manual process? How are the parts coming in and out? What are the interfaces with the machine? Are there any things that the human is doing that he's not even noticing it? Typical example would be maybe doing some cleaning of a part or doing some visual inspection. Again, things that are very obvious for a human operator, but very tricky to do with a robot. So it is really worth investing some time to understand the manual process, because small details here can have a huge impact down the road. And if you realize them down the road, then the more you go, the further you go in this process, obviously the higher the cost. So some think slow, act fast here to really catch these details early on will save a lot of work and a lot of rework, most importantly. To have a successful robotic cell deployment, you need to combine 3 skill sets. The first one, you have it, and that's the most critical one. You have to know and master your manufacturing processes. They have to be standardized, and you have to master them well. And then you need to have robotic skills, so really how to design, how to program these things. And then you need to know how to do project management around robotics. But if you've done project management around introducing new machines, new type of automation, you already have a good part of this skill set. So again, on Lean Robotics and on leanrobotics.org, we have a little checklist on what are the skills that are needed to deploy robots, so you can do a quick self-assessment. And it's important to look at, do you have these skills, and also do you have the bandwidth? So be realistic. If the people you dedicate to the projects are playing firefighters again because they have so many other machines to keep running, be realistic there. It might be better to get the help from external resource, maybe especially for the first project, to increase the bandwidth that you have for the project, and also maybe increase that skill set during this first project. So that's something that we've seen a lot of manufacturers do very successfully, really combining external resource, but keeping their team involved to increase the capacity and increase the skill set at the same time. This is something that Kale alluded to. That's similar to what I discussed earlier. So take time to understand what is the manual process, but also take time, once you have the cell design concept, take some time to do a good risk assessment. And I'm not talking about a safety risk assessment, but really a technical risk assessment. So list all the risk that can make your project go wrong. So one example, let's say you want to use vision in your project. So how confident are you that the vision is going to work for your part in your environment? And how critical is that for the project? So if you're not confident at all it's going to work, and or if it's very critical, meaning if the vision doesn't work, the whole concept doesn't work, then you should validate this. One nice thing is that because ACS is equipped with this equipment, because it's standard building blocks, very easily we can help you eliminate those technical risks. And I really encourage you, again, if you're in that phase where you have time right now, but you don't necessarily have the budget, these are all things that we can do right now to advance these projects before you commit to them. Along those lines, I think it's critical that you stay away from custom engineering as much as possible, because everything that's custom can really bring a lot of waste to the deployment process. So we're really obsessed in manufacturing with efficiencies on the production floor, but sometimes we don't have the same rigor when we do our engineering projects. And I think we should be as rigorous and realize that we bring a lot of waste in these projects in many cases, and doing custom and reinventing the wheel is one way to waste a lot of time and to waste opportunities to create value for our business. So if you do a lot of custom work, you do a lot of design time, you're going to have some custom fabrication that's going to lead to some lead time that will slow down your project or pause your project. It's going to be longer to install, longer to program, because these custom products won't be plug and play. You're going to need to build custom training. You won't be able to leverage troubleshooting resources and documentation that's already done. Same thing for the certification, same thing for the maintenance, etc. So I really encourage you, and I'm a strong believer in standardizing on basic building blocks that are standard. I understand that every application is going to be different, but that doesn't mean that you need to start from scratch all the time. And that's exactly what we offer with the plug and play components. So not so long ago, this is what we look like in the robotics industry, like this guy here at the right, where we try to make a lot of things work together that were not necessarily meant to work together. So individually, that camcorder, that radio, that Walkman, all of these individually, they work well, but putting them together was a big challenge. And building an app today on a phone is very easy because all of this is already built in. And we need to have the same approach in robotics. Obviously, robot applications are not self-contained as much as a cell phone, but still we should build on plug-and-play components. And that's really the core of our philosophy, is really providing these plug-and-play components. So you understand the manual task, you can pick and choose the components, very rapidly come with a proven design, and very rapidly deploying them and start bringing value and start gaining efficiencies. So quickly, the last few tips. This comes back to the point that I mentioned earlier. Try to be as rigorous in your engineering work that in your production operations. Keep in mind that all the waste in the design and integration phase are all delays. And if you can eliminate these delays, then you have a robot that starts production faster, and it can start bringing a return on investment faster. So typically, when we do a payback calculation, we're going to forget that first phase here. But if you reduce that design and integrate time by 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, you have as many months worth of production that your robot's providing to you. So it can make a big difference in the ROI calculation. And the last one, it's more on the human side of things. Again, the technology can do part of it, but the know-how and the people will make a huge difference in your automation effort. And while in the past you were competing for manufacturing talent and manual workforce, maybe against the factories in your locality, the robotics know-how, you're competing with the big tech companies who've been attracting robotics talent for several years now. When I was a grad student 15 years ago, these guys were already recruiting the best talent in robotics. So you were competing with these for robotics talent, as well as with your other factories. So I really encourage you that if robotics is important, invest in grooming your robotic skills. Make sure you include this in the development program for your people. We can help you to do this with the learning resources. And maybe a final note, try to keep a few minutes for the questions. This is a picture of myself quite some time ago. If for those who notice well, the computer here is a Commodore 64. So that's the first computer. I was very fortunate that my dad saw that computers were something, and he brought one home. And we all know today what it means in the workforce. Computers are everywhere. They're changing the way we work, and we couldn't live without them, and we couldn't work without them today. And this is what kids look like. So if you have the chance to get involved into these youngsters initiative who are doing robotic contests and things like that, you'll see that they're really passionate about robots. So robots can be a great tool to increase productivity, increase quality, consistency, reduce the cost. It can also be a great tool for you to bring some youth and energy and dynamic people to the factory floor, which is, I strongly believe, very important for the future of your company. So these are the final words. I would be happy to take any questions if we have some on the chat.
Yeah, we've got a couple. Before we get to it, I thought I would throw out, every time I see that picture of you and your first computer, Sam,
Yeah.
I keep forgetting to tell you my first computer was also a Commodore 64. So
Yeah.
I did a lot of college term papers on that machine.
Yeah.
We did. I did think of one more poll that I wanted to throw out there.
Yep.
I do want to go ahead and publish it right now. I think it's relative. Anyone who knows ACS knows that training is a huge part of our culture. You know, last year we did a total of 38 public training events. This year, we have not been able to do that because of the situation we've been in with the pandemic. We've had to pull that out. Obviously, we're doing things like this, and Sam, it's wonderful to spend your time with us today. But we're thinking about when is going to be the right time to start open up to do the in-person training again. So if you could just provide some feedback of, are you starting to open up or be open to in-person classes again, or are you still more under shutdown while we go over the last Q&A session? That would really help me out in planning purposes. So the two questions that came in on the chat room, Sam, is language programming. People want to know, what programming language should they focus on in learning robotics?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because for robotics in the manufacturing world, the programming language is going to be robot brand dependent. So yes, you're going to be able to learn one and transpose it to another brand later on. But that's one of the sad things of the robotics industry, is that there's no such thing as a standard programming interface. So there is some open source like Rust, but it's not pervasive in manufacturing. In manufacturing, most of the robots will come with their own language. Many of them have equivalent instructions, but in the end, that's one that's more platform dependent. So if your factory already chose what robot brand they want to go with, obviously that's the one you should study. If your company is considering different brands, I think that's an important aspect to consider, because one thing that we've seen many times is that, especially if you're a smaller shops, potentially your robotics know-how is in the head of a few individuals. And if that know-how is difficult to acquire, then you put your business at risk, because if something happens or if that person leaves, then you're at risk of losing that know-how. So that's why we really encourage people to invest in platforms for which the programming language is easy to learn, so you can spread that knowledge a little broader in the organization and allow more people to use the robots and program the robots.
Awesome. All right. Well, the overwhelming majority of folks, 70% say that they're still not open to in-person training. 30% are. So thank you for that feedback. That will go into helping me make decisions on our training platforms as we move forward. One final note I did want to mention as far as the robotic programming, in specific to universal robots and the tools and solutions that Robotiq offers, is those have been created more of a drop-down menu, more of a selection of the icons and selection of the basic command words, rather than the traditional robot structured code-based programming. However, the best way I know of to be able to gain that information, you can go to our online webinar series. We have several out there on our website. You can also go to the Robotiq e-learning. If you go through the Academy on Robotiq's website, it will take you through not only the robot programming for universal robots, but also the programming involved in the Robotiq solutions. There is an online academy at Universal Robots website. If you go to ACS's website, we have links for it there on our robotics page for both Robotiq and UR. But if you really want to get in more behind the scenes, you want to open the hood of the car and really delve into it, the core language that seems to be the dominant language coming online seems to be Python these days. So Python seems to be the one that more people are making reference to. Are you finding that similar in what you're seeing, Sam?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that the Commodore 64 was your first computer as well. So when we look at when I wanted to play games, so I didn't write college paper on my Commodore, but I was playing games. I needed to write machine instructions, so load, open the hyphen, and put the name, etc. So I had to learn the computer language. Today, when I use my phone, the phone understands my language. It understands that I'm moving. I'm just tapping on it. I don't have to write any instructions. And I think that's the slow shift that the robotics industry is doing. And that's definitely one of the way we want to contribute is how can we make programming interface usable with your knowledge of your application rather than having you have to learn the robot language.
Right. All right. There are no other questions in the chat room. So I think we've gotten to everything, and we're right at the end of our lunch hour. I want to thank everyone for attending. Just to let you know, Kelsey McClellan here at ACS is going to be reaching out to you. For those of you who attended the class today, or the webinar, I should say, she's going to be getting your contact information. We're going to be sending out a gift card so that you can go pick up lunch somewhere on us for having been part of our virtual Lunch and Learn. This session has been recorded, and it is going to be posted on our website in our on-demand webinar series. So if you want to review this again, or maybe pull your teammates into it to learn the principles that Sam has put out, you'll be able to do so. And the polls and the questions in the chat will also all be there available as well, just like you had attended the live webinar itself. And Sam, I want to thank you for your time today and being willing to share your knowledge and your skill set with us. It's always a pleasure to get to do a project with you.
Thank you, Kel. Always a pleasure to work with you. Last time at this time of the year, last year, I was visiting you guys for some of the local shows, but happy we can make something work like this at lunch. It was fun.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. If you have questions, please reach out to us on website or info@acs-ga.com. We'll be happy to follow up, and the webinar will be posted the next couple days.
Thanks,
Take
all.
care, everybody.
Have a good one.